Hey folks, Brian Bledsoe again here, just with your June update with Red Summit Advisors. Wanted to get in here a little bit earlier this month. I'm going on some vacation. Most of the information that I have here for you will definitely suffice. We've got another model run coming in during the middle part of this week for the NMME, but I will get that to you at a later date. I don't think that's going to have a huge role in determining the outcome of what we're talking about out there for today. So bottom line, when we're talking about going forward with this forecast, you know that we've been advertising some different things along the way. Well, I wanted to give you an idea of some forecast rainfall anomalies from now through the middle part of July. And this will reset here in just a second. But the thing that I want you to notice when this animation kind of resets itself here in just a second is notice where the green is currently, okay, right there across parts of the Intermountain West. And then notice how the transition takes hold thereafter. It doesn't necessarily go completely dry, but it definitely dries out. And I think that's a testament to the overall weather pattern relaxing a little bit across the western part of the United States. And that would obviously owe to some drier weather if we go forward. The temperature anomalies are the same. Look at all that blue and green right there across the Great Basin through California and the Intermountain West essentially start to go away late this month and especially early in July. And then that gets replaced by some reds and some oranges right there where the temperature anomalies will actually be above. So cold right there, warm north, and then that chilly air or the colder than average air essentially goes away and gets replaced by average to above average temperatures, especially as we round out this month and head into the month of July. Certainly not unprecedented that we would see a change like that simply because we have been fairly cool across most of the Intermountain West too. I want to walk you back to the sea surface temperature anomalies that we showed on May 8th. Okay, and a couple of things that I want to point out that were going on back in early May. The blue off the west United States, that was firmly established right there. We had an El Nino green right here across the equator. We have a warm pool in the North Pacific and a building cool pool off in the western portion of the Pacific. Now, that's how things were stacked on May 8th. Now, what does that look like now? Well, things have changed a little bit. That cold pool that's off the west coast of the United States has been shrinking. The warm pool has been expanding eastward and northeastward across the North Pacific. The colder than average pool out there in the Western Pacific has actually been shrinking a little bit, but that's not a huge thing simply because we've got all this warmer than average water on across the equator with the El Nino that's continuing to build. So probably the most noticeable change, or at least two of the most noticeable changes, is the warmer than average water continues to build along the equator. That owes to the El Nino that's trying to build and the warmer water that has started to establish itself across the North and the Northeast Pacific Ocean. The sea surface temperature anomaly forecast from the Euro-seasonal model, this just came out the other day. This is for June, and you can see what's going on there. We've got a lot of warmer than average water across the equator, a little cooler than average off the Baja. It's doing a very good job pinpointing that, in terms of how it's established. Now, by the time we head toward August, you see that cooler than average water continues to fade off the Baja. The warmth continues to build here in the ENSO regions. The North Pacific continues to warm up. And then if we go into October, we should be dealing with full-blown El Nino conditions by that time. And the overall state of the Pacific Ocean will continue to warm up. But the two main players here going forward, one, the warming of the North and the Northeast Pacific is likely going to continue, and the ENSO region should continue to warm and firmly establish El Nino conditions as we head into the late summer and into the fall. These are the ENSO model forecasts for the month of July. Okay, over here on the left, you've got the BOM, the Bureau of Meteorology in Australia, Canadian, Euro, Japanese, the French, our own NOAA right there, the UK Met, that's Europe, and then you've got the mean between all of them right there. But this is the forecast for the month of July, which is essentially taking everything toward El Nino during that particular time. The BOM is the warmest, and that's been the case for quite some time. But if we look at how things should be shaking out after that, you can see in August, everything continues to warm up. In fact, the Bureau of Meteorology takes us up there toward about 2.2 degrees Celsius above average in the main ENSO region out there. So it's establishing a strong El Nino event, and the other models continue to kind of follow suit. Most of the models go up between about 1.5 degrees Celsius to up to 2 degrees Celsius by the time we wrap up this summer. that would essentially establish it as a moderate to strong El Nino event. I'm not necessarily sure just yet if we will get that established by that time. Some of these models might be a little bit aggressive, but even if some of the more scaled down forecasts from some of the models actually come to fruition, we should be dealing with El Nino conditions firmly established a little bit later this year. Now, that can mean different things, okay? Because there are different types of El Ninos, okay? Over here on the left, a traditional or an east-based El Nino. You see up there in the top graphic, you see the orange and the red right there off the west coast of South America. That is something that we are looking at right now with this particular event, thinking, that may be something that we're kind of going to. The second one over here in the middle is called a hybrid, or it's an east central based. It means that the warmer than average water is shifted just a little farther to the west. Okay. And then over here on the right, a Modoki, or a Central Pacific El Nino episode, where we actually have cooler than average water off the west coast of South America, and the warmer than average stuff is bullseyed most in the central portion of the Pacific Ocean. Now, there are different weather patterns associated with each of those. And the maps that you see on the bottom, those are the temperature anomalies associated, or what is typically expected with each version of El Nino. And the middle graphics there are the upper level weather patterns associated with each, where you see in the purples and the blues, that's where the storminess is located, or the main storm track, where you're seeing the yellows and the oranges, that's where high pressure is, or where there's a lack of a storm track. So the thing that we really need to figure out going forward is what kind of El Nino event are we actually going to have? And we should be able to get that established a little bit later this summer as the oceans continue to evolve. But regardless of the type of El Nino event that occurs, most of the southern tier of the country usually sees cooler and wetter than average conditions. The northern tier, with a traditional east-based El Nino, usually sees drier than average and warmer than average conditions. So there can be some pretty wild ranges as far as what type of weather patterns can actually happen. The other thing here, and this is actually in reference to the MEI, the multivariate El Nino index, from June through August, wherever you're seeing yellows and reds, that's typically where we see wetter than average conditions. I know the color scale is a little bit backwards here, and the green and blue is a little bit drier. So during the summer months, that's what we usually see, which is important because if you look down here across Arizona, parts of southern New Mexico, West Texas, historically speaking, the monsoon is usually scaled back when we have this particular setup. Okay, so that's something that we have to continue to watch too. But to be honest with you, that's something that the computer models have been actually advertising for quite a while. This is the latest Euro seasonal model precipitation forecast for the month of July. All right, so we're seeing the browns. That's where it's drier than average. Greens and blues are wetter. White or gray is usually average. And you can see right there where you're seeing the blues and the reds, coming northward out of Mexico into the Four Corners states. Again, it scales back the monsoon. This particular model does. This model has been very adamant about that actually taking place throughout. In August, it's very much the same way. Some of the drier than average stuff sets up across Arizona, New Mexico, a large part of western Colorado, Utah, Nevada, and even across parts of the northern Rockies right there. The main wet area is right up the nation's midsection from Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas, parts of eastern Colorado, and maybe southern portions of some parts of southern Nebraska right there. That's in August. In September, again, still the tail end of the monsoon season. You're still dealing with rather drier than average flavor across the west and the southwest part of the country versus some slightly wetter stuff here across the nation's midsection. Again, we're talking September, which in many cases you're starting to deal with the seasonal change, and it can be quite variable depending on the weather pattern that sets up. Now, the Euro seasonal model temperature forecast looks like this, okay? The only average to slightly cooler than average in the midsection is right there from northeast Colorado into western Kansas and north Texas, where they've just been getting absolutely hammered with rain during the course of May and in the first week of June. So back over the southwest, where it is drier than average, historically speaking, it should be warmer than average. This is the temperature forecast, the anomaly forecast for July, August, and September. If we look beyond that and go back to the precipitation forecast here for October, you still see a drier than average flavor across most of the western United States during that time, which is not all that unprecedented for an El Nino before it really starts to kick in with the seasonal change. If we go into November, you see we really start to see things change across the nation's midsection. But if you live in Northern California, the Pacific Northwest, Idaho, western portions of Montana, historically speaking, those areas are drier than average when we have an El Nino established. So it's right on target for that dryness to be depicted up there if we look into the middle part of fall with the month of November. So that's something that we're going to continue to watch. And even into December, again, you see central, southern, and eastern part of the country doing average to wetter than average conditions. And out to the west, you see a drier than average flavor, especially in the Pacific Northwest. And we're going to have to do a lot of work here on California, Nevada, and Utah going forward to see exactly what type of El Nino this is going to be and what shapes up best with the historic weather patterns of that particular El Nino. We've got a little bit of time to do that. So just some ideas about what I'm thinking about going forward. And then if we look at the Euro seasonal model temperature forecast anomalies, this is for October, November, December. You see most of the country right there is at least an average, which, it's a long ways out. I usually don't show you the temperature model forecast simply because I think they are in many cases highly flawed. I think they're a lot of times far too warm. So again, we'll have to wait and see how that plays out going forward. We should get a little better signal as well. The IRA multi-model, this is also one of the latest ones, July, August, September. You still see a little drier than average forecast there across parts of northern Mexico, southern New Mexico, far west Texas. I actually think that could be broadened out a little bit more to be more reminiscent of what the Euro seasonal model is showing. And then if we go into September, October, November, you see East Texas, parts of the Gulf Coast get wetter than average, but there's nothing all encompassing during that time as far as a lot of seasonal dryness. Again, this may be a little bit weak with that dry anomaly from what I was showing you with the Euro seasonal model. We'll have to wait and get another month or two before we can really determine that. We have plenty of time going forward, but the shift would definitely be wetter the farther south and southeast you go, and drier the farther north and northwest you go. And that's why I actually think parts of the northern Rockies and the Pacific Northwest will probably have some fire issues during the course of this summer for that simple reason. So in summary, the El Nino continues to develop. I don't see that slowing down. It's too early to tell what kind of an event this will be, how strong it will be, or exactly how long it will last. Okay, those are the details that we'll be figuring out in the coming months. The PDO overall, the Pacific Decadal Oscillation, is still negative. And while it's likely to remain that way, it will likely continue to moderate as the overall flavor of the Pacific Ocean warms up. I remain concerned about the lack of monsoon across the desert Southwest and the Four Corner states. I've been very clear about that over the past few months, so this should come as no surprise. Tropical storm season will likely feature some potential storms in the Gulf or Eastern Pacific. That could also add some late summer moisture, depending on how they set up, but those are big wild cards at this time, and I don't like to really focus on those. So I hope that gives you a little bit more clarity, especially going forward as far as the summer is concerned across the Four Corners area to show you exactly what I'm concerned about. As always, if you guys have any questions, please feel free to hit me up via email or just shoot me a text or whatever, and we can chat about them there. But otherwise, I will be chatting with you guys next month. I hope you're well.